And now the beauty of fasting in Ramadan. Fasting the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed, as was reviewed and investigated in that paper that I just showed you. I'd like to just give thanks and gratitude to the authors of this paper, because it has really opened the door with gratitude for this way of life. And so what happens with normal fasting, as in the extended fasting or the intermittent fasting, or in this case they compared time restricted eating, that is where you have a window in which to eat and then you don't eat in the rest of the window, but you do drink. Now, as we know, when we fast in Ramadan, we wake up pre-dawn, we eat and drink, and then we don't consume any liquids or food stuff until dusk, until the iftar time. The benefit of that is that this type of fasting syncs with our main circadian clock. We have within our cells various clock systems, and all of these clocks are linked with the day-night, the diurnal variation. And so what they have found in these studies is that preventing or not consuming, fasting from food and drink, but eating only in the time pre-dawn and again eating after dusk, helps the body to reset those circadian mechanisms that we mess up by neglecting our sleep and eating all day and just the modern lifestyle. It is a deep and powerful reset for the whole body, and based on that reset there are also various benefits that we find, and this is what makes it superior to other forms of fasting. So the first one I'll mention is brain and cognitive health. And so you might have noticed there's a sudden mental clarity that's associated with fasting in Ramadan. Even though you're tired from the earlier wake-ups and late Taraweeh, we find that there's a bit of a brain boost, and this is due to a protein called brain-derived neurotropic factor. This is a compound, a protein that promotes neuroplasticity, new nerves and pathways growing in the brain. It improves your memory, your focus, and overall brain function. I have to mention my granny, Allah yarhamha. She lived until the age of 95, mashallah, tabarakallah, and she never ever missed a fast. No matter how frail or unwell she was, she suffered badly with osteoarthritis of the knee, but we always noticed every Ramadan she suddenly was so much perkier and her pain seemed to be less of an issue and she was so much more active. This is something that I'm sure that you have seen in your lives too. I've seen it during my exam periods, with my children during their exam periods. So this is one of the reasons why there's a boost in brain function. Another reason is that especially if you're eating a healthy diet anyway, it is easier during fasting to move into something we call ketosis, where the brain starts to use ketones for fuel instead of glucose. And it is these ketones that enhance mental clarity, focus, and cognitive performance. Now, the next point is metabolic health. These studies across the board show that fasting helps regulate your blood glucose levels. It helps to improve insulin sensitivity. We know that there is just an explosion, an epidemic of diseases in the world right now related to insulin resistance. So fasting from dawn to dusk has shown enhanced insulin sensitization, thus reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes or even improving metabolic function in those with diabetes. It supports fat loss because of the lowered insulin levels, weight management, but interestingly enough, in the modern day, people eating a processed food diet, we don't really see a lot of weight loss. The next really important point, the third one, is immune function and the role of the inflammatory system. And we see massive improvements in the immune system during the Ramadan fasting period. There are multiple proteins and cytokines, things like tumor necrosis factor, interleukin 6, all of these that are linked to chronic diseases like diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome. And there is a marked reduction in these inflammatory cytokines, these things that are actually the key factors in causing these diseases. And just a point to note that the studies around COVID showed that the people who were most affected were those who were overweight, were pre-diabetic. There were many people who developed or unmasked their diabetes after contracting COVID. And as we know, most of the mortality associated with COVID came from this group of people. And this is the reason why, one of the main reasons why people died is because, yes, it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but if we're not looking after ourselves, if we're not tying our camels, these people have an activated immune system. And when COVID got into the body of somebody with an already active immune system, it just started to wreak havoc based on what was already happening in that individual. You'll see this again, not just with COVID, but all kinds of viruses, whether it's flu or whichever. We're having more viruses coming up now. This is one of the major areas that we need to focus on. Another important factor is cardiovascular health. Fasting in the month of Ramadan has been shown to improve your blood lipid levels, all of the factors associated with cardiovascular diseases, your blood glucose levels, your blood pressure. Of course, those of you who smoke, you cannot smoke in Ramadan, so some of that benefit may also be because there's a reduction in smoking. Really amazing benefits to cardiovascular health is that found in these papers that I've mentioned, the meta-analyses, is the relationship between inflammation and the heart. Now, I've just mentioned how Ramadan fasting boosts the inflammatory system. It reduces all the pro-inflammatory cytokines, those proteins that say there's something wrong, there's a foreigner, there's an invader around, we have to be on high alert and we're fighting. So basically, when you have inflammation, you're fighting in the system. The question is, what are you fighting? And there's a lot that we're fighting when we eat a poor diet. The benefit of fasting in Ramadan, when these inflammatory cytokines came all the way down, was that they noticed that in these individuals that were being researched, that their resting heart rate went down. Now, resting heart rate is a really valuable indicator of overall health and overall cardiovascular health. You want your resting heart rate to be lower, under 70, under 60 if possible. Really, this association with the 30-day fast and inflammatory molecules coming down showed that with these people, despite having an abnormal sleep cycle, that their resting heart rates actually dropped. Now we know that in Ramadan, our exercise drops. We don't do as much exercise as we normally do. So this is actually something, it's a really important sign and benefit of fasting. Improves overall metabolic health, improves your cardiovascular health, and it's associated with an improvement in all-cause mortalities. And then cellular health and repair, point number 5. Fasting encourages cellular health and repair. We have a process called autophagy, a process where damaged cells and degraded cells that are working but they're not really doing their job so well, they get removed from the system, broken down, reassembled, and then replaced by fresh new cells. This process is called autophagy, and this is something that is enhanced during the Ramadan fasting period. Detoxification of the body. So this allows, the fasting allows our natural detoxification processes to be enhanced, and the liver can now stop breaking down everything we're giving it every half an hour, and it can heave a sigh of relief and start to detoxify just the general wear and tear, get it out through the kidneys. So we're amping up the toxin clearance in our bodies. Point number 6, gut health and turnover. Fasting, you're giving the gut a rest, and so it allows the gut to repair. Cellular turnover within the gut is enhanced. There's also positive benefit in what's called our gut microbiome, the bugs that live within our gut that help us to function optimally, that we absolutely need for a healthy gut and a healthy body. Point number 7 is weight management. We know that fasting in general promotes weight loss, and so we see that in all types of fasting, but specifically in this short-term dawn to dusk fasting, there's a reduction in calorie intake, and we can see a reduction in weight loss. Point number 8 is kidney health. We see improvements across the board in the health of kidney function, especially those with chronic kidney diseases. And this is something surprising because, as everybody knows, we don't drink in the month of Ramadan. But that point in itself, that dehydration, is actually associated with some benefit in the body. The next point is pregnancy outcomes. It was found in these studies that while fasting, of course, you're not expected to fast in pregnancy, and it should be done with caution. Some studies suggest that in women who are healthy and well nourished, that fasting may not significantly affect the birth weight. But of course, big caution here. Pregnant women, please consult your healthcare provider before deciding. Remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it that we are not obligated to fast during the month of Ramadan, and we're allowed to make up our fast. We're growing another human, so please do not put unnecessary harm or difficulty on yourself. And the last point I've mentioned at the very beginning is the circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm regulation, fasting, especially this dawn to dusk pattern, it helps to regulate this clock rhythm, and by eating in daylight and then nothing in between, and finally eating again at dusk, we synchronize the body's natural 24-hour cycle. Now, you may be surprised to learn that we've got various clocks. Every organ has a clock, and every single organ is linked to the gut. So, for example, when it comes to sleep, your gut clock waits for about 3 hours after your last meal to go, okay, the kitchen's closed, I can now get to work, and relay to the brain that we're closed for business. And basically the fasting period that comes during sleeping kicks into action, and this time is so important for the sleep cycles, deep sleep, and so much maintenance and memory transfer and the immune system, everything that happens during this period of deep sleep. And what was very interesting to note in these studies is that despite the fact that sleep was disrupted during Ramadan, as we know, Tarawih ends very late and then we have to wake up for suhoor, there was still no negative benefits.